My name is Evelyn Miller. I'm 84 years old. I live alone in a modest nursing home in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My hair's more silver than snow now. My back curved like the weeping willow tree I once planted in my backyard. People see me and assume I lived a quiet, predictable life. But if they only knew. If they only knew that I once had a child with a man who wore the collar of a priest, who called me a sin in private and a blessing in the dark, only to vanish before the child was born, leaving me with nothing but shame and a baby I was too young to understand and too old to forget. It happened in 1961. And I have kept the secret for over 6 decades. Till now. Just last week, during confession at St. John's, the very church where it all began, I sat behind the veil and whispered, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned with someone just like you." But before I could finish, the priest stood up and walked out of the confessional. When I opened the curtain to see who it was, my knees buckled. Because standing there, pale as the walls, was the man himself, Father Samuel Carter. But older now, wrinkled, and even more afraid than me. He had come back. And just before I could confront him, he turned and ran down the aisle, disappearing again like a ghost into the nave. My hand trembled against the wooden frame of the confessional booth. I hadn't imagined it. It was him. After 63 years. Back in the same church. Wearing the same collar. You must be wondering how we ever got here. Let me tell you everything from the very beginning. But beware. This isn't just a story about love. It's about loneliness, betrayal, temptation, and the cost of silence. I was born in 1939 to a family that believed in structure, silence, and Sundays. My father was a war veteran turned steelworker, hard as the boots he polished every morning. My mother was a church secretary who never missed Mass and never let me forget that girls were made to serve, not speak. We lived in a small house on Humboldt Avenue, and every morning, I walked past the tall, cold spires of St. John's Church on my way to work. I was 22 when I first met Father Samuel. He was the new young priest from Chicago, transferred after a temporary reassignment that nobody dared question. He had dark curly hair and soft brown eyes that rarely looked up during sermons, but when they did, they held you in place. Everyone adored him, especially the women. Married, single, widowed. They all lined up to confess the same sins, hoping to catch more than just forgiveness. But I wasn't like them. Or so I thought. Back then I worked in the church's accounting office. I kept track of tithes, envelopes, and receipts. I wore modest skirts and sensible shoes. My world was black and white, until Samuel started staying late, offering to help me count the collection trays. "You work too hard," he'd say, his voice like warm oil. "You should let someone take care of you for once." I laughed the first time he said it. Nervously. Because I had heard about priests being flirted with, but never one who flirted back. One Friday evening, as I bent over a stack of forms, he leaned over my shoulder. His breath was on my neck. Froze. My hands trembled on the papers. "You smell like chamomile," he said. I told myself it was just the incense messing with my head. But when I turned, our faces were so close I could feel the warmth of his cheek. That was the first time I kissed a priest. Or rather, that was the first time he kissed me. Pulled back horrified. "Father. Samuel," he interrupted. "Call me Samuel when we're alone." That night I couldn't sleep. Prayed. Cried. Paced. But the more I tried to erase the kiss, the more I remembered how safe it felt. How seen I felt. The next week he didn't mention it. He acted like nothing happened. Until I found a note in my desk drawer. A single sentence written in red ink. "Meet me in the rectory garden tonight at 8. My heart thudded so hard I could barely breathe. I shouldn't have gone. But I did. The garden was silent, lit only by the moon. Samuel stood by the roses, hands in his coat pockets, eyes full of thunder and gentleness. "I shouldn't want this," he said. "Then why call me here?" "Because I want you anyway." He pulled me close and I didn't fight. Not this time. That night, under the stars and beside a statue of the Virgin Mary, I let him love me. or what I thought was love. I gave myself to him body and soul, believing, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this was what God had secretly meant for me. But God doesn't bless secrets. He exposes them. 2 months later I found out I was pregnant. I went to Samuel in a panic. His face drained of all color. "Are you sure?" he asked. He nodded. He paced. "We'll figure something out. I just need time." But time ran out quickly. Within a week, he had vanished. No goodbye. No note. No transfer papers. Nothing. Just gone. The church told everyone he had been called on mission abroad. But I knew the truth. He ran. From me. From the child. From God. I was left to face it alone. The shame in my mother's eyes when I told her I was pregnant nearly crushed me. My father didn't speak to me for 5 years. The church asked me to resign quietly. No one asked who the father was. No one dared. I gave birth to a baby boy, David. I told him his father died before he was born. It was easier than telling him the truth. And for 63 years I lived with that lie. Until last week. Until I saw Samuel again. And now that he's back, I don't know if I want answers or revenge. But I do know this. I won't let him disappear again. Because I'm not that scared little girl in the garden anymore. And he doesn't get to run from the truth this time. Not when my son, his son, is alive and deserves to know who he is. Not when I've been silent for too long. But before I could even think of what to do next, someone knocked on my nursing home door. It was a young woman. Early 30s. Blonde. Nervous. "Are you Evelyn Miller?" she asked. "Yes. I think we're related," she whispered, handing me a photograph. My knees gave out again. Because in the photo was Samuel, holding a baby that wasn't mine. And the woman said the 4 words that turned my blood to ice. He said he was my father. The photograph slipped from my trembling hands and landed softly on the carpet, face down, like it carried the weight of every buried secret I'd spent a lifetime protecting. My chest tightened as I looked up at the young woman again. Same soft jawline, same intense eyes. Those eyes. Samuel's eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, hesitating. "I didn't mean to frighten you. I've been searching for answers." I reached for the edge of the table to steady myself, forcing my mind to stay in the present. Who are you?" I whispered. "My name is Grace Carter," she said. "My mother was Elena. She passed away last year. Before she died, she told me my father was a priest, and that he abandoned her before I was born. When I finally traced the name through old records and church rosters, it led me here. To Samuel Carter." The room spun. My hands were cold. Samuel hadn't just run from me. He hadn't just abandoned one child. He had done it again. "How old are you?" I asked quietly, still unable to meet her eyes. 33, she said. My breath caught. That meant Samuel had fathered Grace 10 years after he disappeared from my life. 10 years after David. I sat down heavily in the chair by the window. The rain had started outside. A thin drizzle that tapped against the glass like it wanted in on the conversation. Grace bent down and picked up the photo. "I found this in my mother's things. He's holding me. I was maybe 2 months old. And then, nothing. No calls. No letters. Just silence." I reached for the photo again. Samuel looked younger than I remembered, but it was unmistakably him. His hands held Grace like she was fragile porcelain. I knew that touch. I felt it once. "You said you traced him here." "Yes." She nodded. "A parishioner at the church told me he returned recently. To St. John's." Of course he did. Like a snake returning to the warmth of the rock it once slithered under. My mouth went dry. "He came back last week," I said slowly. "I saw him. I was in confession. And he walked out before I could finish." Grace's eyes widened. "You know him." I took a long breath, then let the truth slip from the crack in my soul. "He's the father of my son." The silence that followed was so dense, so still, it could have swallowed the storm outside whole. Her mouth parted slightly. Wait, that would mean. You have a half-brother, I finished for her. Grace sat down across from me, clearly as stunned as I was. I never thought I'd find family this way. Neither did I. I told her everything then. About how Samuel and I had met, the garden, the pregnancy, the betrayal, the silence. Her eyes glistened as she listened, a single tear slipping down her cheek. My mother, she said softly, was only 19. She said she fell in love with a man who promised her heaven, and left her with hell. I nodded slowly. He did the same to me. Long pause. Grace suddenly stood. We need to confront him. I stared at her, shocked by the steel in her voice. He can't keep doing this to women, she said. To children. I hesitated. Grace, I'm old. I've carried this for a lifetime. I'm not sure I can. No. You have to, she said, eyes fierce now. You have more right than anyone. She was right. I had spent my entire life letting shame keep me quiet. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about David. It was about Grace. It was about every woman who had ever trusted someone who wore a collar and found herself ruined in the shadows. We'll go to the church, I said. Tomorrow. Grace nodded. She helped me stand, gently taking my hand. For a moment we just looked at each other. Two women from different times, united by the same heartbreak, the same man. After she left, I sat by the window and stared at the rain. And for the first time in decades I let myself cry. Not just for the baby I raised alone or the family I lost along the way. But for the girl I had been. And the woman I never got to become. The next morning, Grace returned with a quiet determination in her step. She drove us to St. John's in a silver Toyota with cracked leather seats and a cross hanging from the mirror. I hadn't been back since last week. I didn't want to be. The church loomed ahead like a memory I couldn't erase. Cold, towering, holy and haunted. Inside, the air smelled of incense and secrets. A nun greeted us at the back pew. Can I help you? We're here to see Father Samuel Carter, Grace said firmly. The nun blinked. He's in his office. Grace turned to me, as if asking permission. He nodded. We walked down the narrow hall, past stained glass windows that looked more like confession booths than art. Finally we reached his door. Grace knocked. Come in, said a voice from the other side. She opened the door. And there he was, older, thinner. His beard now silver and trimmed, but still with those eyes. He looked up, and froze. The blood drained from his face when he saw me. Evelyn, he breathed. And then he looked at Grace. And it was like watching a man see every sin he ever buried rise from the grave. No, he whispered, backing away. Yes, Grace said coldly. You remember me, don't you? He looked cornered. Like a wolf who suddenly realized the forest was on fire. I stepped forward, my cane steady in my hand. You left me. You left her. You left both of your children. His mouth opened, but no words came. You promised me God's mercy, I said. But you left me with shame. You promised her protection, and gave her abandonment. Grace pulled a photo from her coat and slammed it on his desk. Is this you or not? She asked. He stared at it. Then slowly sank into the chair like his bones couldn't hold his secrets anymore. I tried, he said. I tried to forget. You don't get to forget, I snapped. You don't get to disappear and pretend none of this happened. His voice cracked. I was young. I was scared. I thought. You thought wrong, I cut him off. Grace folded her arms. You told my mother you loved her. You left the day she told you she was pregnant. How many others, Father? His hands shook. Two. Just two. Two that you know of, Grace hissed. He looked up at me, tears now rising in his old glassy eyes. I've lived with this guilt for years. Then do something about it, I said. Meet your son. Tell him the truth. He's 61 years old, and he's never known who his father was. And me? Grace asked, voice cracking now. Do I matter? He buried his face in his hands. It was hard to watch, but not harder than living it. Not harder than 63 years of silence. We don't want your pity, I said. We want the truth. And you will give it. He nodded weakly. I'll meet David. I'll explain everything. I promise. I turned to leave. Grace followed me, but before she closed the door behind her, she looked back. You had 2 chances, she said. Don't waste your last one. As we stepped outside, I felt the weight of something lift from my chest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking away in power. But just as we reached the car, Grace's phone buzzed. She picked it up. Her face went pale. What is it? I asked. She looked at me with horror in her eyes. He just called the diocese, she said. He told them someone broke into his office and threatened him. My stomach dropped. You mean, he's trying to cover it up again? Grace nodded slowly. He's turning it on us. Closed my eyes. Rage and fear boiled in my chest. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The silence in the car on the way back was thick enough to choke on. Grace held the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles pale as bone. I sat stiffly beside her, my fingers clenched in my lap, staring straight ahead but seeing nothing. He's not going to admit to anything, she finally said, her voice hollow. He's going to frame us like he's the victim. I nodded slowly. That's how men like him survive. They wear a collar to gain your trust, and when they're exposed, they twist the truth until everyone else looks dirty. My heart ached, not just from the betrayal but from the realization that I had truly believed he'd changed. After all these years, some naive part of me still hoped the man who once whispered love in the church garden might still exist beneath the robes. But no, he hadn't changed. He'd evolved into something colder, martyr, more dangerous. When we got back to the nursing home, Grace followed me up to my room. We didn't speak until the door was shut behind us. What now? She asked. I reached into the drawer beside my bed and pulled out an old wooden box. The hinges creaked as I opened it, revealing a stack of yellowing letters, photographs, and one small, unopened envelope. I handed her a picture of me holding David as a newborn. My son never got to know his father. He thinks the man died in Vietnam. That lie gave him peace. But now... I trailed off looking at the envelope. Maybe the truth matters more than the peace. What's that? Grace asked, nodding to the envelope. Held it up. It's from Samuel. I never opened it. Her eyes widened. You had a letter from him all these years. He nodded. It came 3 months after he left. I was too angry to read it. And then I was too scared. What if he said he didn't love me? What if he said the baby wasn't his? I thought it would break me. So I buried it in here. Grace sat down beside me. Do you want to open it now? My hands trembled as I turned the envelope over. I stared at the faded stamp, the unfamiliar postmark. Kansas City. I inhaled deeply, slid my finger beneath the flap, and peeled it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, carefully folded. My eyes scanned the words slowly, carefully, as if they might burn my fingers. Evelyn, I have sinned in ways I cannot undo. I left not because I didn't love you, but because I did. I was afraid of what I had become. Afraid of what I had done to you. The church threatened to strip my collar if I stayed. They found out. I chose the cloth over you. I was weak. Sorry. I will never ask you to forgive me. But please, if the child is born, name him whatever you choose. Just know I loved him the moment I knew he existed. Samuel. The tears came hard this time. Not from heartbreak, but from the cruel weight of what could have been. He had chosen the church over me. Over David. Over everything. I passed the letter to Grace. She read it silently, her face unreadable. He admitted it, she whispered. Even back then. Yes, but no one else knows. I stood up, the anger in my chest now fully awake. We need to make this public. Grace looked startled. You want to go public with the story? He nodded. It's not just for me. It's for every woman who's been silenced. Every child denied the truth of their bloodline. He doesn't get to hide behind God anymore. But will anyone believe us? She asked. Then we'll make them believe, I said. We find David. We show him the letter. Then we tell the diocese, the press. Hell, the whole town if we have to. Grace's eyes filled with fire. Let's burn the lies to the ground. That evening, Grace helped me find David's number in my worn address book. My son now lived in Denver, a retired architect with 2 grown kids and a wife named Marilyn. I hadn't seen him in 4 years, but we spoke every Christmas. I wasn't ready to tell him everything over the phone, but I had to start somewhere. Dialed. Hello. His voice, deep and calm, filled my ear. My heart swelled with love and dread. David, it's Mom. Hey Ma, you okay? You sound shaken. I hesitated. I need to see you. It's urgent. I can't say it over the phone. He paused. Should I be worried? No, I lied. Just confused. He promised to fly in the next morning. Grace and I booked a hotel room in town for him and prepared everything. The photos, the letter, even a birth certificate copy. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with every scenario. Would he hate me? Would he feel betrayed? Would he even believe me? The next day, when David walked into the lobby of the nursing home, he looked just like Samuel did at his age. Same brow, same posture, same piercing gaze. I felt like I was looking at history rewritten. Mom, he said, hugging me warmly. You scared me. I'm sorry, I whispered. I led him into the small visitor's lounge where Grace was waiting. David, I began. This is Grace Carter. She's your half-sister. His eyes widened. He looked at me confused. What? I nodded slowly. Please sit. I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. And so I did. From the beginning. From the garden. To the baby. To the letter. To the silence. To Grace. He didn't speak for a long time after. Just stared at the floor. When he finally did, his voice cracked. So all these years, you lied to me. I nodded again. I did. 'Cause I was ashamed. Because I didn't want you to grow up with the shadow of being a priest's illegitimate child. I was trying to protect you. But I see now I was really protecting myself. He ran his hand through his hair and looked at Grace. So we're half-siblings, she said quietly. He laughed bitterly. Unbelievable. I know it's a lot, I said. But I couldn't die with this lie on my chest. He looked back at me, his expression softening. You're not dying, Ma. No, I said. But I'm ready to live truthfully now. He stood up. I need air. We let him go. I sat there, staring at the empty chair, my hands trembling. You did the right thing, Grace said gently. He just needs time. Later that night, David returned. His face was calmer, his steps heavier. He sat down beside me and placed a hand on mine. You were young. You were scared. I get it now. My eyes welled. You don't hate me. He shook his head. No, I just want to meet him. Not the priest. The man. I swallowed hard. You might not like him. I don't care, he said. I just need to see him. Once. The next morning, we made an appointment with the church secretary under the pretense of a private counseling session. She didn't suspect anything. Samuel opened the door himself when we arrived. And for the first time in 61 years, father and son stood face to face. The air was electric. You're David, Samuel said. And you're the coward, David replied. I braced for violence. But it never came. Just silence. Then David pulled the letter from his coat and dropped it on the desk. You wrote this, he said. Now say it to my face. Samuel's eyes watered. He took a deep breath. I failed you. I failed your mother. I failed God. David clenched his jaw. You don't get to say God's name. Fair, Samuel whispered. I only ever loved 2 women in this life. Evelyn and Elena. And I ruined them both. Grace stepped forward. And me. He looked at her. You are the only thing I did right. Too bad you didn't stay, she said coldly. I watched all of it, heartbreak, fury, catharsis, unfold before me like a judgment day I never imagined living to see. As we turned to leave, Samuel called out, "What happens now?" David looked back. "You're going to resign. Publicly. You're going to tell the truth. Or I will." Samuel's shoulders slumped. "You wouldn't." "I will," David said. "Not for me. But for my mother." Samuel nodded. "I understand." But something in his eyes made my stomach twist. That afternoon we waited for the press release. For his resignation. Never came. Instead we got something else. A police officer knocked on the door of the nursing home. "We received a report," he said, "that you've been harassing a member of the clergy. We need to ask you some questions." My heart nearly stopped. Grace stepped forward. "You've got to be kidding me." But the officer wasn't. Samuel had filed a report. And now, we were the ones being investigated. The officer's voice echoed in the hallway, slicing through the calm of the nursing home like a razor. "Ma'am, we just need you to come down to the station to answer a few questions. You're not under arrest." But his eyes told a different story. Suspicion. The kind I'd seen before, when a woman's truth sounded too wild, too emotional, too inconvenient. Grace stepped protectively in front of me. "Are you serious? She's 84 years old. And you're saying she harassed a priest. Have you even read the complaint?" The officer, a young man with a badge that looked like it had been pinned on yesterday, shifted uncomfortably. "The report says she threatened Father Carter. That she and another individual, presumably you, stormed into his office with hostile intent." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny but because it was so predictably sad. "He's trying to silence us," I said flatly. "Like he always has." The officer looked at me for a long moment, then lowered his voice. "I don't want to escalate this. Can we just go have a chat at the precinct? Clear things up?" David had just arrived from his hotel when he saw the uniformed man standing in my room. His eyes immediately darkened. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. "Your mother's been asked to come down and answer a few questions," the officer said. David stepped forward. "I'm her lawyer." That wasn't technically true. David wasn't a practicing lawyer, but he had studied law before switching to architecture. He knew enough to cause trouble. "She's not answering anything without legal representation," he said. "And unless you have a warrant, you're not taking her anywhere." The officer hesitated. "We'll be in touch," he said, backing off. As he left, the whole room seemed to exhale at once. Grace slammed the door shut behind him. "He's playing dirty. He's scared." He nodded. "And scared men are dangerous." That evening, we met with a woman named Denise Cobb, an investigative journalist from Milwaukee Weekly News who Grace had contacted a few days earlier. Denise had won awards for taking down crooked school boards, abusive nursing homes, and even a corrupt bishop. She listened quietly as we told our story. Every word, every kiss, every child, every abandonment, every lie. When we were done, she sat back in her chair, eyes narrowed. "This could be massive," she said. "If you're telling the truth." "We are," Grace snapped. "And we have proof." I handed her the letter. Photos. Even a copy of David's birth certificate with the name listed as Father Unknown. "I'll need to verify everything," Denise said. "But if it checks out, this could blow the lid off the entire parish." A strange silence filled the room. For the first time in decades, it felt like someone believed me. Not just tolerated my truth but believed it. Wanted to fight for it. She stood to leave. "But you need to be prepared. Once this is published, there's no going back. You'll be hated. Maybe even sued." I smiled faintly. "I've already lived a life in hiding. I have nothing left to lose." After she left, David turned to me. "You sure about this, Mom?" He nodded. "I should have spoken out when I was 22. I didn't. But I'm speaking now. We waited anxiously for 2 days. Then the article dropped. Front page. Bold headline. Sins in the Sanctuary. Retired priest accused of abandoning 2 illegitimate children. Grace's photo was there. Too. Even a blurred one of David. The story hit harder than we expected. By noon, the phone at the nursing home was ringing off the hook. Reporters. Old friends. Strangers. Some offered support. Some offered threats. That afternoon, the church released a vague statement. Father Samuel Carter has voluntarily stepped back from all duties pending investigation. We are committed to transparency and will fully cooperate with civil authorities. It was a polite way of saying, let's hope this blows over. But it didn't. People started coming forward. Other women. Other stories. One claimed he had gotten too close during confession. Another said he made advances during counseling sessions in the 70s. Suddenly, Grace and I weren't alone. But with the storm came lightning. That night, I woke to find Grace pacing in the hallway, her phone shaking in her hand. "What is it?" I asked. She turned, her face white as paper. "He's gone." "What do you mean he's gone?" "Samuel," she said. "He left the rectory, packed his things, disappeared again. Just like before." My stomach twisted. "He's running." David joined us moments later, already on his laptop. He bought a ticket. To Guadalajara, Mexico. I felt the rage rise in my chest like a fire that had been waiting for kindling. "Not again," I whispered. "He doesn't get to run again. We can report it," Grace said. "He's under investigation. Fleeing could be obstruction. We need to act fast," David said. "I'll call Denise. Maybe she can get the authorities to stop the flight." Hours passed. We didn't sleep. The news was everywhere by morning. The church issued another statement claiming they had no knowledge of his travel plans. By midday we got word. The flight had left. He was gone. Gone again. Gone like he had never even existed. Grace sat on the couch hollow-eyed. "He always escapes. Always." I walked to the window and stared at the gray sky. For a moment I felt defeated. Like everything we'd done, every truth, every scar exposed, had been for nothing. But then, a knock. Not on the door. On my soul. We weren't done. He had run. But this time the world knew. He would never wear a collar again. He would never whisper absolution again. He would never bury another secret again. That evening, the diocese announced they were stripping Samuel Carter of his title. Permanently. They claimed it was due to age and declining health. But the truth was clear. They were cutting ties. Washing their hands. David raised a toast at dinner that night. "To the truth," he said. Finally. But just as we clinked glasses, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Answered. A voice shaky and low. "Evelyn." My heart stopped. It was Samuel. Calling from a Mexican number. "I read everything," he said. "They've destroyed me." "No," I replied coldly. "You destroyed yourself." He was silent. Then a whisper. "I have cancer." I said nothing. "I have less than 6 months." I still said nothing. "I just want to see him," he pleaded. "One time. Just once. Before I go." My voice came out like stone. "You had 61 years." And I hung up. Grace looked at me. "Was that?" He nodded. "He's dying." David looked at me. "What now?" I stared at the phone. Because I didn't know. Or should I let him die with the weight of what he did? My heart knew the answer. But my soul wasn't sure yet. I didn't sleep that night. The call replayed in my head on a cruel loop, Samuel's voice, weak, trembling, yet somehow still manipulative, slipping through the cracks of my memory like smoke I couldn't grasp. He was dying. That fact alone should have stirred something in me. Pity, maybe. Sadness. But all I felt was a strange kind of quiet rage. 6 months to live. After 61 years of silence. How convenient. By morning, the rain had started again, drumming lightly on the roof of the nursing home like a reminder that no matter how much you bury, the past finds a way to leak through. I sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the foggy distance when David came in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said. "I didn't." He handed me the warm paper cup and sat beside me. "Was it the call?" He nodded. He waited, then added softly, "So what do you want to do?" That was the question. And I didn't have an answer. Not yet. "I don't know," I whispered. "Part of me wants to face him. Look him in the eyes and let him see what he left behind. The other part wants him to fade away. Forgotten. Alone. Just like he left me." David didn't push. He just sat with me in the silence. The same silence I'd lived with for decades. Only now it didn't feel lonely. Felt shared. Later that afternoon, Grace returned from a lunch meeting with the journalist, Denise. Her face was tight, her jaw set. "We've got a problem," she said. "What now?" asked Weary. "There's a bishop out of Chicago," she said, "who just issued a public statement defending Samuel." I sat up straight. "Defending him?" She nodded. "He says, and I quote, 'Father Carter is a man of deep repentance who has lived a life of service. These accusations are an attempt to destroy a faithful priest in the final days of his life.'" My blood turned to fire. "He's turning himself into the martyr now," David growled. "He's playing the dying man card, making himself the victim." Grace nodded. "It's working. The diocese won't back us any further. They're staying neutral now. Which basically means they're letting public opinion bury the truth again." I stood slowly. "Then we need to go to Mexico." They both stared at me. "You're serious?" David asked. "I am," I said. "If he's dying, I want to see his face. I want to speak my truth to his face before he dies in comfort, pretending he was the noble one." "You don't owe him that," Grace whispered. "No," I agreed. "But I owe it to myself." 3 days later, we boarded a plane to Guadalajara. Denise helped fund the trip with donations from women's groups who had read the story. Grace came along, ever protective. David insisted on joining too, despite his hesitations. I think he wanted closure as much as I did. The city was bright and warm, its streets bursting with life and color. It felt surreal, walking through such vibrant places to visit a man who had caused so much decay in my soul. We found him in a modest hospice clinic nestled in the outskirts of the city, a place run by Catholic volunteers. His name had been changed on the records. He now went by Sam Reyes, a final attempt to distance himself from his past. But it didn't work. We were let in by a nurse who, surprisingly, knew who I was. She'd read the article online and gave me a long, knowing look before guiding us to his room. "He's been expecting you," she said quietly. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and old prayers. When I stepped into the room, the air went still. He was lying on a narrow bed, thinner than I remembered, pale, hooked to an 4-drip. But those eyes hadn't changed. He looked at me as if seeing a ghost. "Evelyn," he whispered. "Samuel." Grace stood at the door. David didn't enter. I walked slowly to the chair beside his bed and sat down, letting the silence stretch like a tightrope between us. "You came," he said weakly. "I came to speak. You came to listen." He nodded. I took a breath, then began. "I loved you. You made me believe I mattered. And then you took that love and turned it into shame. You let me raise a son without a name for his father. You watched me disappear from the church you said was our sanctuary. And now, you want forgiveness because your clock is running out." He swallowed, looking down. I was scared. "I was too," I snapped. "But I didn't run. I stayed. I fought. Bled. I carried everything you abandoned." His voice cracked. "I thought about you every day. Then why didn't you come back? I was afraid you'd hate me." Understood. "You were right." Grace finally stepped in. She walked to the edge of the bed and handed him the photo. Her baby photo in his arms. Do you even remember this day? She asked. He blinked slowly. She had a small fever. I held her until she fell asleep. And then you left, she said. You always leave. His lips trembled. I wasn't good. I never deserved you. Any of you. No, I said. You didn't. But we came anyway. So you would see the cost of what you did. You don't get to rewrite the ending. This is it. Here. Watching you fade. He turned to David, who finally stepped inside. I'm sorry, he said. I don't ask for anything. Not your love. Not even your forgiveness. Just, thank you for letting me see your face. David's expression was unreadable. I don't hate you, he said. But I'll never respect you. And you'll never meet your grandchildren. Samuel's shoulders collapsed further. I stepped forward, pulling something from my bag. It was the original letter. I placed it on his chest. You wanted me to name him whatever I chose, I said. I gave him your first name, David. The only good part of you. He looked up stunned. And now, I added, I take it back. He closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. We left the hospice without looking back. On the plane ride home, none of us spoke for hours. There was nothing more to say. The storm had passed. But the wreckage remained. A week later, news came. Samuel Carter, also known as Sam Reyes, passed away quietly in his sleep. No funeral was held. The church declined to speak on record. But the truth had already been told. Denise published a follow-up article. He died in silence. She lived out loud. Thousands read it. Hundreds wrote in. Women, children, survivors of their own versions of Samuel. And me. I sat by the same window in the nursing home, watching the birds flutter across the sky. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. But just as I closed my eyes to rest, Grace called. Her voice was breathless. Evelyn, I just got something in the mail. What is it? It's from a lawyer in Mexico. My breath caught. He left us something, she said. What? She hesitated. His diary. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges like it had been touched by time more than once. Grace met me in the nursing home lounge that afternoon. The envelope clutched to her chest like a secret she wasn't sure she wanted to know. I opened it, she said softly. Just a few pages. And Evelyn, it's all there. Everything. She placed the diary on my lap. A plain leather-bound journal, cracked at the spine. No name on the cover. No embellishments. Just a single small cross pressed into the bottom right corner. Subtle. Like him. David joined us minutes later. He sat across from me, hands folded. His face hard but unreadable. He hadn't said much since we returned from Mexico. I could tell he was still processing, still sorting through a life where the man he hated was also the man who made him. Grace opened the diary to the first page. Her fingers were steady now. August 3, 1961. Sin. I crossed a line I can never uncross. I held her in the garden, beneath the statue of Mary, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged to someone. Not the church. Not the collar. Just her. And blinked. The garden. He remembered it too. Grace turned the page. I watched her sleep once. After the rain. She looked like mercy itself. And I knew even then I would never have the strength to stay. I would run. Because that's what cowards do when they mistake weakness for calling. The next few entries blurred together. Musings, half-prayers, fragments of guilt. He wrote about being called to Chicago. About how the parish covered his transfer. How the higher-ups knew something was wrong. They gave me two choices. Disappear quietly. Or be defrocked publicly. Chose silence. I wore the robe. But inside I was already hollow. By the time we reached the section dated 10 years later, his tone had changed. It was angrier, bitter, like he'd grown tired of lying even to himself. Elena was nothing like Evelyn. She was fire, reckless. She didn't care about my title. She wanted me anyway. And when she told me she was pregnant, I nearly collapsed. The guilt I had buried came roaring back. I saw Evelyn in her eyes. I saw my son's ghost. David shifted in his seat. I think he was haunted by you, Grace whispered to him. All his life. David didn't respond. He stared at the floor, unmoving. We turned another page. This one was Messier. Darker ink. Shaky lines. I keep having the same dream. Evelyn is holding the baby. She's calling out my name, but my mouth is sewn shut. I can't answer. I can't move. And the baby slips from her arms into the river. I wake up soaked in sweat. Every night. I wiped my eyes. Part of me still didn't want to feel anything for him. But the words, they were real. Like he'd bled them onto the page. The last pages were written after his diagnosis. They say the cancer's in my lungs now. That it's spreading. I don't know if it's punishment or mercy. Maybe both. But I need them to know. Evelyn, I loved you. I was too weak to deserve you. David, I wanted to be better for you. But I failed. I hope you became the man I never could be. Grace, you were my second chance. Failed you too. But not a day went by that I didn't wish I could change it. If they find this, let them know I never stopped thinking of them. Let them know the silence was my sin. And the sound of their names was my salvation. The final page had just 4 words. I remember the garden. I closed the book gently, as if it might break apart if handled too harshly. Grace looked at me. Do we tell the world? Publish this? Thought about it. About the women who were still silenced. About the children who still carried unnamed pain. About the way my own soul had stayed frozen for decades, waiting for something that felt like closure. And then I shook my head. No, I said. Not yet. Not for the world. Grace tilted her head. Why? Because this wasn't for them. This was for us. I handed the diary to David. He took it slowly, almost reverently. I don't know what to do with this, he said. You'll know when the time is right, I replied. But for now, it belongs to you. David didn't say a word. He held it tightly and walked out. Grace and I sat in silence. A softer silence this time. A silence that didn't hurt. 2 weeks later I got a letter. Not from the church. Not from the press. From a woman named Rebecca. She was 67. And she claimed she was Samuel's daughter. I stared at the page, stunned. Another one. Called Grace immediately. There's more, I said. Grace was quiet for a moment, then exhaled. I figured there would be. We met Rebecca at a cafe 2 towns over. She was gentle. Wore glasses. She had the same hands as David. Her mother had met Samuel in the 1980s, years after he'd been reassigned to a counseling center under a new name. No color. Just paperwork. She'd gotten pregnant. He'd denied it. She'd moved away. I didn't even know his name until the article, Rebecca said. When I saw his picture, I nearly fainted. I looked at Grace. She looked at me. How many more? I whispered. We may never know. But here's what we did know. He was gone. We weren't. And truth doesn't die when its keeper does. We decided to hold a small memorial, not for Samuel, but for the children he left behind. For the women who were silenced. For the parts of ourselves we'd had to bury just to keep moving forward. No church. Just a park bench. Rosebush. A folded letter tied in ribbon. We placed the diary in a lockbox, buried it under the tree beside the bench, and left a plaque that read, For the silenced, may your stories rise. As we turned to leave, David took my hand. I don't forgive him, he said. But I forgive myself. For wanting to know. Smiled. That's enough, I whispered. But just as we reached the car, my phone rang. An unknown number. Answered. A man's voice. Quiet. Anxious. I read your story, he said. Yes. I think I'm his son too. I think I'm his son too. The words echoed through the phone like a ghost walking through my living room, familiar and terrifying all at once. I stood frozen by the window, phone pressed to my ear, staring into the gray clouds outside as if they might explain what I was hearing. "Who is this?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "My name is Anthony," the voice replied. "I'm 56. I was raised in St. Paul. My mom worked at a retreat center in the late 60s. She always told me my father was someone powerful. Someone she wasn't allowed to name." My hand trembled slightly, and I motioned for Grace to join me. She sat beside me on the couch, concern etched in every line of her face. "I saw the article," the man continued. "Your story, timeline, name, the garden. It all matches. My mom used to say he smelled like incense and had a voice that made her believe in miracles." I exhaled slowly, my lungs burning with grief I didn't know I still had left to feel. "You've never met him?" "Yes." "Never. She passed 2 years ago. All I have is a box of letters she wrote to him. Never sent. They're signed, 'Forever yours, Maggie.' One letter says she forgave him, even though he denied the child. I found them 3 weeks ago." Grace reached for my hand and gave it a soft squeeze. "Anthony," I said, "you might have 2 siblings." Silence. "I always dreamed of having siblings," he whispered. "But not like this. Not from so much pain." "I understand," I said. "I don't want anything," he added quickly. "Not money. Not a story. I just wanted someone to know I exist. And maybe to be seen." "You are seen," I whispered. When I hung up the phone, the room was still. Grace looked at me. "That's 4. He nodded. "And counting." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "How does one man leave behind so many unfinished stories?" I thought of the journal buried beneath the tree, the empty bench by the roses, the pages soaked in regret, and the years lost to silence. "By confusing power with love," I said. "By confusing God's calling with man's excuses." The next few weeks became a cascade of confessions. 3 more people contacted us through the journalist, Denise. One was from Canada. Another from Ohio. The last, South Africa. Every story echoed the same refrain. Seduction cloaked in scripture. A promise whispered during prayer. Then a disappearance. And silence. We started a list. Not of names. Of truth. Proof. Of dignity returned. We didn't go to the church anymore. The building, the institution. It had protected Samuel more than it had protected his victims. But we found something sacred in each other. In the circle that kept widening. In the siblings who met through video calls and letters and voice notes, trying to piece together who they were through the holes left behind by the same man. David helped organize a gathering that summer. Not a reunion. Not a ceremony. Just presence. We rented a small lodge near the lake in Madison. There were 11 of us in total, confirmed children of Samuel Carter. Each of us brought something. Photos, stories, unanswered questions. Grace brought the journal. We sat in a circle and took turns reading aloud. Each word hurt. Each word healed. One woman, Frances, 52, a teacher from Ontario, read a line from the journal and broke into tears. "I failed them. Failed them all. But still they live. That must count for something." She looked up, tears streaming. "We lived. We survived him." David nodded. "We're what he left behind. But we're also what he couldn't destroy." That night, we lit candles on the dock and placed them in the water. One for each of us. Not in his memory, but in ours. Not to forgive, but to release. As we stood in the quiet, I saw Grace staring into the flames. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "That I was born of sin," she said. "And yet somehow, I feel holy now." Smiled. "Not because of him, but in spite of him." She turned to me, eyes shining. "You know, you were the first. The one who kept the secret the longest. And the one who broke it." "I had to," I whispered. "Or I would have died with it still strangling my heart." We drove home with the windows down, wind in our hair, a quiet peace surrounding us like armor. Back at the nursing home, I found a letter waiting in my mailbox. No name. No return address. Just an envelope with my name written in tight, shaky handwriting. Inside was a photograph. Me. Samuel. The garden. Someone had taken it from a distance. Gasp. Grace stepped behind me. What is that? A memory, I said. One I thought no one else saw. On the back of the photo, one sentence was scribbled. You were never invisible. And suddenly I wept. Not because of Samuel, but because somehow, somewhere, someone had seen the moment I had hidden away inside myself for decades. I wept for Evelyn, age 22, who thought her body was a sin. I wept for Evelyn, age 30, who lied to her child. I wept for Evelyn, age 84, who finally found her voice. And when the tears dried, I sat at my desk and began to write. Not for the press. Not for the church. For women like me. For the daughters. For the sons. For the ones who carried shame that wasn't theirs to carry. My story began with a seduction. But it ends with a choice. Choice to be whole. To speak. To live. To rise. Because forgiveness isn't always the gift we give others. Sometimes, it's the freedom we finally give ourselves.